Good morning. Continuing with the session on the poem The Sea and the Skylark by Gerard Manley Hopkins, let us now look at the imagery and symbolism in the poem. The second quatrain centers on the skylark, one of a number of birds Hopkins' attention is drawn to in his poetry. Like falcons and thrushes are two other examples. On his left hand lie the sand dunes over which the lark is soaring. The imagery seeks to convert sound into sight, as we are asked to see the bird's song as a musical score, pouring out of its throat, then falling like a fisherman's line reeling out. It is not a straight line, as there are kinks in it where the line has been pressed into the reel. Each kink represents a bar line, and the line is being rewound onto another reel, which the bird will take when he swoops downwards, so he can begin again. Such a complicated image is often called a conceit. The word rewinded is a play on words, as a fisherman rewinds the reel, but also an instrument is winded or played, as in winding a horn. Question. Describe the verse form and the use of sound patterns. The poem Sea and the Skylark by Gerald Manley Hopkins is written in the verse form of an Italian sonnet, consisting of 14 lines and being divided into two parts. The first part can be classified as two quatrains in the rhyme scheme ABBA, ABBA. Thus, the embracing rhyme. Hopkins uses this rhyme pattern to describe the coherence and regularity of the nature, exemplifying it by the sea and the skylark. To underline this harmonious effect of sea and lark, he makes great use of various sound patterns, starting off in line 1, where we can find two identical rhymes, ear, ear, and two, 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 symbolizing uniformity and shore more content. The skylark, on the other hand, is free. His joyful singing almost vibrates out of the sonnet, lines 6 to 8. Its music curls and winches from the sky. Formally, Hopkins expresses this opposition by the division into two parts, using the octave for the description of the earth and the sextet to point out the negative aspects caused by human civilization. While the first part has a very positive character, expressing joy and agility, the second part appears dark and destructive. This effect is created by contrasting words as, for example, fresh and dust. This opposition remains rather unresolved. The only solution offered for the discrepancies between nature and men is the death of the latter ones, which doesn't appear that satisfactory. In the last line, it is stated that even the human being is part of life's endless circuit, which consists of birth and death. But one gets the feeling that the author does not see any positive effect resulting from our existence. In line 12, we find a hint that there isn't any improvement expected, but rather a further decline with the ongoing development of men. Have we ever contributed to the positive features of earth and nature? Then this has by far been lost. We have lost that cheer and charm of earth's past prime, he says. whatever we may have created is not just not going to last, but we also even destroy actively. Our make and making break are breaking. Analysis. The Sea and the Skylark was a sonnet penned by G.M. Hopkins. This poem is lesser known than his other poems like Windhover. The year of publication. The poem was written in 1877 while Hopkins stayed in St. Biano's College in the city of Ryle. The subject matter. The Sea and the Skylark is one of the finest sonnets penned by G.M. Hopkins. At first, this sonnet had the title Walking by the Sea. It is a fine expression of the poet's obsession towards the corruption of man and primal innocence of nature. Standing at the seashore, Hopkins hears two natural sounds: the roaring sound of the wave and shrill melody of the skylark. Both these sounds come from opposite sides, first from the sea and second from the sky, and affect his ears separately. In his right ear, he hears the sound of tide regularly striking against the shore with certain intervals. With each wave, the water floods the shore and then recedes with a corresponding alternation of sound. There is a brief pause, which is followed by the sudden roar of the next wave. This alternation noise will continue to attend upon the shore as long as the moon continues to wax the sea. The poet sings, on year and year to noises to hold to end. Trench right the tide that ramps against the shore, with a flood or a fall, low luff on all, or all roar, frequenting there while moon shall wear and wind. These ringing lines register the complex music of nature, heard from the Welsh coast, set against the sordid human world. Gerard Manley Hopkins was inspired by the charm and interest of Wales, and also by the Welsh poetic device known as Singhaned. In 1877, the year of his ordination, he wrote a number of groundbreaking, almost ode-like sonnets. Among them is the poem The Sea and the Skylark. Spatial and sensory location are important at the site of the octet. The speaker is standing on or beside the beach at Ryle, the seaside town in North Wales, where the sonnet's first draft was written. With a sense of double occasion, he hears the sea on his right and the lark song rising from the meadowland on his left. The registering of these complex sounds requires 2 years, and from the diction, all the range of polyphonic effects it can dispense. An arrestingly discordant word doubling in the first line, year and year, and the homonym of two noises too old is further complicated by the N echo across the line break, end trench, used as an intransitive verb. Trench is dramatic, and the dash henan caesura seems to increase the depth of the cut incised. The sea itself makes a divided noise as a flood or fall, with a heavy pebbly harshness of right tide ramps suggesting the incoming tide, and a gentler consonantal strand depicting the low lull-off as the tide retreats. That the process is continuous and endless is beautifully conveyed in the present participle of frequenting. The sea and the moon are almost personified, but Hopkins challenges the poetic convention as he flirts with it, weaving into 2 lines the oral complexity of a 5-part fugue. The sea itself makes a divided noise as a flood or a fall, with the heavy pebbly harshness of right tide ramps suggesting the incoming tide, and a gentler consonantal strand depicting the low lull off as the tide retreats. That the process is continuous and endless is beautifully conveyed in the present participle frequenting. The sea and the moon are almost personified, but Hopkins challenges poetic convention as he flirts with it, weaving into two lines the oral complexity of a five-part fugue. Paired spondees help the internal rhymes sound out as the second quatrain begins. The lark's score is his song, visualized as a skein. Now, a skein, children, is जिसको हम हिंदी में लच्छी धागे की जो लच्छी होती है गुच्छा, that is a skein, which uncoils in a process that combines the rash fresh and the repetitive in an endless intricate pattern, rewinded and new skeined. The movement of coiling and curling from a wild winch whirl being probably a noun here, is both free and controlled. And line 8 tells us not a note of this music is excessive or wasted. The description of the lark song in line 7 almost follows the pattern of the sing head grows crossing head in crisps of curl of wild winch whirl. Perhaps the lark himself is singing a version of singhead. The repeated W's which evoked languor in line 4, while moon shall wear and bend, now contribute to the breathless energy. Hopkins looks downwards in the sestet, condemning human intrusion, and with a mix of frothily light and grittily heavy adjectives, shallow, frail, sordid, turbid, and evoking a miniature industrial revolution in the hard, angry, reductive rhymes of are making and breaking, are breaking, and making break are breaking. Generally, the rhythms are more regularly metrical than in the octet. The sea and the skylark embodies the nature's and God's moral challenge. They ring right out, the diminished, man-made present, right now, coming back adverbially to contain both fully and correctively. Dust and slime represent a spiritual degeneration. No doubt, they are also the visible byproducts of the construction work that changed Ryle from centuries old fishing village to Victorian watering place. Even earlier in the sonnet, in words like trench and roar, these human efforts at creation are subliminally present. Redundant in its conscious argument, they nonetheless add further elemental sound effects to the tidal and melodic singed of Hopkins' praise, contrasted with man's last dust. Man's first slime might be an image of regeneration rather than despair. This sonnet was written while Hopkins was in a 3-year course of study at the Jesuit Theologate St. Bunos in North Wales. He wrote many of his best known poems during this period. One autograph of this poem is dated Ryle, May 1877 and is entitled Walking by the Sea. Suffering from fatigue, Hopkins is granted permission to spend some time at the seaside resort town of Ryle, 8 miles north of St. Bunos. Hopkins writes later to his friend Robert Bridges on November 26, 1882, that this poem was written during his Welsh days when he was fascinated with singed sound arrangement within one line, using stress, alliteration, and rhyme. Two sounds are entrenched in his thinking as he walks along the beach. On his right, the ebb and flow of the waves on the shore, and on his left, the unfurling song of the skylark. In the sestet, the last lines of the sonnet, Hopkins reflects on what a shame it is that we have lost the ability to pay attention to and appreciate these sounds of creation, that is, those of the sea and the skylark. With this, we end the poem, The Sea and the Skylark by G.M. Hopkins. Thank you.